Okay, hi everyone. Today we are going to be looking at the topic known as the parasympathetic system. I remember last time when we were in the class, we looked at what we call the sympathetic system. So basically, the general topic that we're looking at right now is known as the autonomic nervous system. Okay, then allow me to go to the next slide. So now let's look at the introduction of the parasympathetic system. So it is generally a motor system that involves the involuntary control of the body. So that is when you're defining the autonomic nervous system. So it talks about the involuntary control of the body. Now, when you look at systems that can be regulated or controlled by the autonomic system, there are very plenty in the human body, okay? So now, for instance, when you talk about the RAS system, the RAS system is controlled by both the endocrine and the autonomic nervous system because you don't have conscious control. When you talk about the smooth muscles, all those things, they're being controlled by the autonomic nervous system because smooth muscles have got a characteristic or a property known as they are involuntary type of muscles, meaning they're being innervated by the autonomic nerves, all right? So now it is also known as the general visceral efferent system. It's a system that is able to affect or cause a response or elicit a response in the major organs. So for instance, when you talk about the heart has got what we call the autonomic innervation. So it's being innervated by what we call the vagus nerve, which can be able to control the speed or the rate at which the heart is able to beat, together with the help of other type of endocrine secreted type of substances or hormones. So this is what this bullet or point talks about. It innervates all structures in the body except the skeletal muscles, okay? So meaning only the skeletal muscles do not have innervation by the autonomic nervous system. As you know, when we were learning about muscle physiology back then, we talked that muscles are controlled by the autonomic nervous. I mean, muscles are controlled by the somatic nervous system. We can say they have got voluntary control, the skeletal muscles. For example, if I want to run, I can command my muscles to start running. Okay, so you have got a degree to control the capacity or how much you can be able to do certain activities using your muscles. So you have conscious control, right? So you'd find that most of the muscles of the body, because you don't have, other muscles of the body, we don't have conscious control. Like you find that muscles of the private parts are smooth muscles. We don't have voluntary control. But wow, the muscles of the hip and other types of skeletal muscles, we have got control. No wonder when we talk about the muscles of respiration, we have got both involuntary and voluntary, meaning respiration, you can control it. And again, the autonomic nervous system can be triggered. For example, if someone is swimming, okay, then they decide to go underwater. They're able to hold their breath, maybe up to somewhere 3 minutes or so. Why? But the moment the carbon dioxide accumulates in the blood, ends triggering certain responses in the brain, which will result in overriding the voluntary aspect of respiration. Hence, you start breathing. That's what causes people even to drown, because at a certain period, they are able to hold their breath. But the moment carbon dioxide accumulates, it causes the involuntary aspect of the autonomic nervous system to be triggered. All right, let's go to the fourth bullet. Anatomical divisions such as sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous system. Okay, so anatomical division, they are divided in about 3 types. There is sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric nervous system. I believe you know what sympathetic is and parasympathetic is. Okay. Then the enteric nervous system, that's what most people don't have an idea of, which is the nervous system of the GIT, or it's the brain of the gut, meaning it controls the GIT. The sympathetic is activated during stress and the fight or flight response, meaning during times of stress, okay, or discomfort, okay, that's when the sympathetic is activated. Hence, you need to fight or flee, meaning you can run away or you can stay and fight, okay? That's what has to do with the sympathetic. Then when you talk about the parasympathetic, is noted predominant in rest and digestion, okay? Yeah, so sometimes you find that even people try to talk about the enteric nervous system as it being part of the parasympathetic. Yeah, the enteric controls motility, secretion of GIT, and is influenced by both the somatic nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so when you hear the word motility, as you know, the GIT contains smooth muscles, which are circular and longitudinal muscles. These muscles are able to cause the movement of particles from, or food particles, or the bolus, or different types of food particles from the mouth up to the anus. Because we always, when you eat something, after a few days or after just a few hours, we are able to, it enters on the other side of the body, then it exits on the rear end. So that is what we call motility. And I'm sure when you are learning about the digestive system or the gastrointestinal tract, you did learn about motility. Again, when you talk about the aspect of secretions, okay? So in GIT, we have got two types of secretions. We have got what we call the endocrine, and we have got what we call the exocrine, okay? So the endocrine have to do with hormones, hormone-like substances, which are ductless glands. Then you have got the exocrine, which has to do with the digestive enzymes and other products, other secretions that are able to facilitate the process of digestion. So if you can see, digestion is a very, very important aspect of your body and other processes that you're talking about. So no wonder we are learning about both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, okay, today, so that you can be able to appreciate the information. Let's go to the next slide. So now let's start looking now at the parasympathetic nervous system. So the highest center of outflow is in the hypothalamus on the anterior part. The highest center of outflow is in the hypothalamus on the anterior part. So a balance of this and the posterior part keeps the two systems in balance, okay? The descending fibers stimulate the brainstem, nuclei in the pons, and the medullary centers, all right? So what they're trying to talk about, they're trying to talk about how the parasympathetic nervous system is connected to the brainstem, or how it's able to supply, okay, or able to connect to other parts. So the highest center of outflow is in the hypothalamus on the anterior part. A balance of this and the posterior part keeps the two systems in balance. The descending fibers, okay, stimulate the brainstem, nuclei in the pons, and the medullary centers. Let's go. So now, on this, you're going to see that there's a diagram there trying to show where there's a pons, midbrain, medullary oblongata, salivatory nuclei, all these parts, and the nerves which are coming out of them, okay? So that's what we are going to be going through in this text, okay? So in the brainstem, the Endinger Westphal nuclei are stimulated by the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system, from the hypothalamus. Arising from these are the preganglionic fibers that move with the third cranial nerve, okay, which is known as the ocular motor. They terminate in the ciliary ganglion. The postganglionic fibers innervate the sphincter of the pupil and the ciliary muscles. The acetylcholine works on the M receptors, causing a more globular lens and accommodating the far near vision, okay? So now, if you can see, when you learned about vision, I'm sure you're able to connect. So this is just talking about how, in a case of someone to see something that is maybe far away. So this is just talking about how the nerves are able to connect and how they're able to supply information to facilitate a response, okay, for near vision, right? Yeah, so that's what this diagram is talking about. Then let's talk about autonomic control. So as you can see, we have got the hypothalamus there, right? Okay, then the hypothalamus spine and the hypothalamic tracts. Then there are also hypothalamic reticular and reticular spinal projections. So these nerves, if you can see, there's some innervation between T1 to L2, also S2 to S4. So these are different parts of the spinal cord where you can find these different types of innervation. So there's cranial parasympathetic, then there's also sympathetic, and there's also pelvic parasympathetic. Okay, so that's what this is trying to show, this basically this diagram. Let's go to the next slide. So the next nuclei is stimulated. The next nuclei stimulated are those of the inferior lamellatory and salivatory nuclei that move together with the seventh cranial nerve. Okay, the preganglionic fibers innervate the postganglion ones in the pterygopalatine ganglion. From here, the postganglionic fibers innervate the lamacro glands, causing them to secrete the other fibers, stimulating the nasal and the palatine glands to secrete. Other bunches of fibers from the nuclei pass through the middle ear to the submandibular ganglion. Okay, it's just talking about how the parasympathetic works. Okay, from here, the postganglionic innervate the sublingual and submandibular glands. So, like you talked about, when you talk about the autonomic nervous system, okay? So now, if you look at it, another bunch of fibers from the nuclei pass through the middle ear to the submandibular ganglion. From here, the postganglions innervate the sublingual and submandibular glands. As you know, the sublingual and submandibular glands, these are glands that are found in the mouth and they're responsible for the production of saliva, okay? So we have got the midbrain there. Just like this is the same diagram that we are looking at that side. So that's just trying to talk about how these nerves are able to connect and they're able to conduct certain processes that are related to the autonomic nervous system. So now, the superior salivatory nuclei, when stimulated, flow through their fibers that move together with the ninth cranial nerve to the optic ganglion. Okay, optic ganglion. Okay, there were some letters or words which are missing there. The postsynaptic fibers stimulate the parotoid glands. The dorsal nuclei of vagus is also stimulated, and the preganglionic fibers move together with those of the vagus nerve, or the 10th cranial nerve. As you've heard about the vagus, it's one of the most interesting type of nerves, okay, that is responsible for the autonomic response. It innervates the heart, also to cause either the decrease or the increase in terms of the rate at which the heart beats. So we'll talk about that later, or you have already learned about that. Yeah. So now let's go to the next slide. So it has a wide distribution, which include the following: the pharynx, the larynx, esophagus, lungs, stomach, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, cesium, and part of the colon. The other nuclei stimulated are in the sacral 1, 2, and 3, whose fibers the pelvic nerve innervates the last part of the GIT, the urinary system, and the genitalia. Okay, so as you know, the genitalia is being stimulated by the autonomic nervous system. Okay, yeah, and that makes sense because the muscles which are found there, they are what? Smooth muscles. Let's go to the heart. Okay, so the heart, the negative chronotropy and dromotropy. Okay, the acetylcholine stimulates a receptor that is bound to the G inhibitory. So this inhibits adrenal cyclase, and positive ion influx is inhibited. The receptors also facilitates the stimulation of the potassium channels, increasing the influx of potassium. This results in the hyperpolarization. The ventricles have no receptors and no parasympathetic influence. Right? So that's just a diagram trying to talk about the different types of the sympathetic nerves and this parasympathetic nerve. So there's the vagus nerve there. Okay, so B, beta, and beta 1, beta 2, then M2. So there's gonotropy, gonotropy, inotropy, and esotropy. So these are this is a cardiac myocyte, meaning a cardiac muscle cell. Okay, yeah. So the abdomen on the GIT, the vagus releases the ACH and increases motility and secretion. So this whole PowerPoint is just talking about how the nerves are able to connect to each other from the brain stem or from the, from the spinal cord, and be able to supply to the peripheral organs or other organs that are found around them, and make them to either have sympathetic or parasympathetic control. Okay, that's what they're talking about. So in the abdomen, on the GIT, the vagus releases ACH and increases motility and secretion. Okay, so as you know, motility is very important for movement, and there's also secretion. So in order for digestion to take place, the food has to move at different stages. So as it's moving, you realize that at each particular stage, there will be enzymes that are going to be produced, and those enzymes are going to affect the GIT in a certain way. Okay, so you'd find that in the mouth, we are going to, we talked about the sublingual, submandibular, and the parotid. Okay, they're stimulated also by the autonomic nervous system. So once they produce enzymes and other type of substances that enhance or facilitate digestion, such as bicarbonate, bacteria, and other things are produced in the mouth. In the mouth, you can only digest a certain quantity or certain amount of food. Then later on, you realize that it has to proceed to different parts for it to elicit or affect a response. So in the mouth, something else, it starts moving now into the esophagus. So you find that the digestion that takes place in the mouth, the digestion of body starch, is very minimal. Then as it moves into the stomach would terminate the digestion that started in the mouth. Okay, so but does not happen there. It takes time for it to stop. Then as it stops, digestion of protein starts, because hydrochloric acid is being produced, okay, which is able to activate the pepsinogen to pepsin, okay, to convert that into be able to catalyze the proteins, which specifically the collagen, to break down the collagen that is found in the protein diet that you took in. Then later on, after gastric emptying, so you find that all these things, as they are moving, motility is an aspect. Then again, there are secretions which are being produced, and these are being regulated by the autonomic nervous system. So that's how important it is, okay? Then the sacral, the pelvic nerves have the intraneural ganglia, okay? Yeah. Then at one point, they talked about even has to do with genitalia. So genitalia is also going to be stimulated by that, okay? Although some papas like saying that, no, you can control sex. I doubt it if you can control it, yeah. So this is just talking about the autonomic control and the nerves it supplies to go and control different types of parts in our body or organs. So if we went through this diagram. So this is the end of this lecture and session. I hope you get one or two things from this PowerPoint. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me. Bye.